In 2024, the Washington Commanders unlocked their championship window, starting with the trade for Deebo Samuel. In 2025, they're pushing that thing open. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome inside today's episode of Locked On Commanders. I'm your host, David Harrison, here with you 5 days a week, even during the NFL offseason. I am your friend on the ground covering the Washington Commanders for Sports Illustrated's CommanderGameDay.com. You can also find me helping out with the local DMV coverage of the team for WUSA9.com. I want to thank you for coming through for today's episode, in which, of course, we're going to be talking about the Washington Commanders trading for San Francisco 49ers wide receiver Deebo Samuel. That news confirmed by me here on Saturday night, shortly after the initial reports surfaced. Every dayers, those of you who come through every day, you know we've been talking about trade ideas and targets and offseason moves. Want to appreciate you for coming through. And if anybody out there is not already, please subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you are listening to this episode right now. And if you're new to the show, I want to thank you for finding it. I want to thank you for hunting us out. Hopefully you'll find some good stuff. Hopefully you'll come back and see us again. Maybe you'll be a future everydayer like all the other everydayers. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And right now at FanDuel, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So the Washington Commanders are trading for San Francisco 49ers wide receiver Deebo Samuel. Of course, this team connected to that potential move ever since it was discovered that the 49ers were interested and were publicly acknowledging that they were interested in moving the veteran wide receiver. And before we get into all the things that are Deebo specific, what we got to do is look at the big picture here. The Washington Commanders in 2024, above all expectations, predicted to win about 7 games in the 2024 season. First year with GM Adam Peters, head coach Dan Quinn, rookie quarterback Jayden Daniels, beat the brakes off of that expectation, won 12 regular season games, end up in the playoffs, win not one but 2 playoff games in the NFC playoff picture, end up in the NFC championship game 60 minutes from the Super Bowl. So you could say it's successfully in 1 year's time unlocked their Super Bowl championship window. However, the question coming into this offseason would be, what kind of moves would Adam Peters make? How would Adam Peters address this offseason, approach this offseason to do things to open that window, start getting it even just a little bit of a crack open so you can look at this team and say they have a legitimate chance to not only repeat the success they had in 2024, but go even a little bit further. This trade for Deebo Samuel starts to open that window for the Washington Commanders, I believe. And we'll get into all the details of why I believe that here coming up in the episode. But the next thing I want to talk about, and I think I want to approach, is you, Commanders fans, the people who are here because you're a diehard fan, you bleed burgundy and gold, you call the team whatever team name feels most comfortable for you, and hopefully you're not out there arguing with everybody, because at the end of the day, guys, we all want the same thing. We all want this Washington football team winning football games. Every single trade this offseason has been tied to the Washington Commanders. Deebo Samuel, most recently Brandon Ayuk, San Francisco 49ers wide receiver, that a lot of people in Washington talked about last offseason, preseason, as he was having his contract dispute with the 49ers. Potentially there's a trade here for the Washington Commanders. Great friends with Jayden Daniels. Adam Peters knows him. But now all these other trades as well. Myles Garrett, no connection to Adam Peters, no best friends on the Washington Commanders roster. It's not about that. It's about the legacy of the team. It's about the elevation of the team. When these key blue chip players, marquee names in the NFL scene, go out there, start looking for new homes, what does everybody do on the national media, local media side? They start tying them to other teams. But guess what? When it's a team, or when it's a guy that wants to go chase a Super Bowl championship opportunity, or a guy who's looked at as a guy who could help get a team over the hump, they don't look at them and say, hey, maybe he can go to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Maybe he can go to the Tennessee Titans. Maybe he can go to, sorry, Ross Jackson, the New Orleans Saints. No, they say, what teams are on the cusp of winning championships that this guy could go make a great impact on? The Washington Commanders were, just as of even last offseason, one of the teams that we just mentioned before in that group. Right now, they're now officially a team that is in that upper echelon group. When you talk about blue chip players like Deebo Samuel that can make big impacts on NFL teams, who are the teams, what teams are out there that could be a Deebo Samuel away from reaching the ultimate goal in the National Football League? That is the state of the Washington Commanders this offseason. We've seen it all across the board. But now that this trade has actually been executed, you have a firm piece of solid evidence that you can grip to when you're talking to your fellow fans or even your rival fans who might be friends or family out there. So Washington Commanders fans, round of applause to you because you've been here through so much, all the ups and downs, all the drama, all the turmoil. So enjoy the moment. Even if you weren't necessarily on top and on board with the Deebo Samuel trade, we will get to some of those concerns here in just a little bit. Even if you're one of the fans that wasn't necessarily sold into the Deebo Samuel trade, I want you to look at it just from the lens of your team. Your favorite team is now a team that across the National Football League, when you're talking about players that can make an impact for a championship caliber team, when you're talking about players that want to go hunt championships, the Washington Commanders are a team in that conversation. Of course, that is the biggest takeaway for me is that the Washington Commanders, one, they're now that destination for free agents, for trade targets, all of it alike. Two, they now have the capacity to actually do it. And three, it makes sense. And all those three things combined means that you have a much larger chance of repeating 2024 success, extending it into the 2025 playoffs, potentially competing against teams like the Philadelphia Eagles. How do we get to that point? Well, that is where we got to dive deeper into Deebo Samuel. Who is Deebo Samuel? What is he going to bring to this team? How does his impact with quarterback Jayden Daniels further expand his impact? And then, of course, we are going to talk about the concerns that some Commanders fans, including our insiders, have been voicing to me ever since the Deebo Samuel trade started becoming a rumor. And, of course, the Commanders were tied to it. And, of course, it's all leading into our Mock Draft Monday episode coming to start next week, a Deebo Samuel impacted Mock Draft Monday. So we got a whole lot of things to cover here over the next few days as we react to this news. Deebo Samuel coming to the Washington Commanders, reported compensation unconfirmed at this time, 5th round pick. So you're getting a day 3 pick. And yes, the Washington Commanders are taking on all of the contract salary left and the bonuses left on the Deebo Samuel contract. Again, that is reported, so far unconfirmed, but reported by reliable sources in the media. So that is the deal. Let's talk about the impact of the deal. Coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we're going to do that thanks to our friends over at FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay hooked into the action. If you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. And everydayers, you already know same-game parlays. That's my jam. I love using FanDuel's live betting features because it keeps every moment in the game exciting. I even like to drop same-game parlays. Sometimes middle of the third quarter, I'm in there trying to get deals done on the FanDuel app. So whether I'm backing my favorite team, a late game rally, or picking players to hit clutch threes, I never feel like I'm out of the action or missing out on the action. Right now, new FanDuel customers, you can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So go to FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Continuing our conversation here on Locked On Commanders about the news, the Washington Commanders are trading for San Francisco 49ers wide receiver Deebo Samuel. That news confirmed by me shortly before hitting record on this episode. However, the trade is pending a physical, which goes a little bit into some of the concerns that some of you have out there. Again, we'll get into those concerns, but here we're going to talk about our player review of Deebo Samuel. Just who is Deebo Samuel? What could his impact be with Jayden Daniels as a force multiplier here working? And I think that's really where we're going to get to the crux of everything. We're going to get to the real meat of what a Deebo Samuel arrival really means. And I think, listen, first and foremost, I want to talk about the person, right? I want to talk about the dude. And this will be the next time I meet Deebo Samuel will be the first time I meet him in the National Football League, but it will be the second time I meet him in this life. The first time I met him, 2019 NFL Scouting Combine. And it's actually really funny, guys, because and I'm going to tweet this picture out at some point in time, at least I plan to. I remember talking to Deebo at the 2019 NFL Scouting Combine. I'm going through, it was my first Scouting Combine, right? Full disclosure. And I'm going through the list of podium players, and I'm going through a list of prospects, and I'm saying, who do I not know much about? Who do I know a lot about? Who do I want to learn more about, right? And I'm going through this list of receivers to prep for the day. The next day when they're talking to the podium, I'm going through names. I'm like, who do I know? Who do I don't know? Who do I not know? look at Deebo Samuel. I'm like, this is a dude that I kind of know a little bit from South Carolina. I don't know all the things about him. So I want to make sure I get to his podium. I want to make sure I talk to him. And at the time, right, you're a one-man operation. So I'm like, there's 8, 9, 10 podiums, interviews going on at one time. They're all going on at the same time. So if you want to talk to multiple people, you got to stick and move. You know what I mean? It's like boxing. You can't just stand there in one spot and just wait for something to hit you in the face. You got to go find work. So my plan was to start at Deebo and bounce around a little bit. I ended up spending the entire time with Deebo Samuel because as he spoke and as we as a media scrum in front of him spoke to him and asked him questions, including myself, there's just something about the dude. The intensity, the deliberateness in his responses, the fact that he made eye contact, didn't flinch, didn't blink, all of these things. It was just impressive, man. And that's really the biggest thing I can tell you when I came away from Deebo Samuel's podium time at the 2019 NFL Scouting Combine was impressive. So impressive that he went firmly on my radar, my personal radar, as a potential Buccaneers draft pick because I was like, this is a dude that fits what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers want in a receiver, want in a player in their building. Now, obviously, the Buccaneers didn't draft him. The 49ers did. And he very quickly became part of what the 49ers wanted their team to be about. Versatile, passionate, competitive. Those types of things are the exact types of things this team wants. And of course, that's not really a surprise, right? Adam Peters, general manager of the Washington Commanders, comes over after being an executive for the San Francisco 49ers, was part of that staff that scouted and then ultimately drafted Deebo Samuel in 2019, right? So it all goes hand in hand, but you also have a coaching staff here that mirrors that approach, and not just mirrors it, but takes it and expands it into the locker room, and Dan Quinn and all their coordinators and coaches, right? So you've got a versatile player here, a guy that can certainly line up outside and do some damage, right? He's not going to be A.J. Brown. He's not going to be Devontae Adams, right? But he can certainly line up outside and do things and work against guys out there. Certainly can line up in the slot. He can also line up in the backfield. He can be a running back option. He can be a quick route option, intermediate option. And certainly there are ways you can get him open, make him available down the field. So the versatility fits what Dan Quinn, what Adam Peters say they want in pretty much every player, right? You love guys like Terry McLaurin who are just really good and real dominant doing what they do. But when you get guys that can do multiple jobs on the field for you, it just makes you that much harder to defend on the football field. Passionate. Nobody can deny that Deebo Samuel is passionate about what he's doing. This dude does not step on a football field without the purpose to be on the football field and to be a difference maker. And that goes into the competitive spirit. That is something that you hear every NFL coach talk about wanting, every GM talk about wanting, but honestly, it's just something that not every dude has on a football field. Deebo Samuel has that competitive spirit in droves. You turn on any game you watch Deebo Samuel in, you're going to see that competitive spirit. Sometimes it comes out in a negative way when things are not going well. Again, we'll talk about those concerns here in just a little bit. Don't worry. I'm not discarding them. We will talk about them, but you got to have that competitive spirit to be successful in the game. And he certainly has that. And then run game. This isn't a receiver that's only going to be impacting the quarterback. We'll talk about Jayden Daniels here in a second. This is a receiver. We talked about it during the season. You see these perimeter passes, these screens, you see these perimeter runs, and you see receivers being relied upon to be blockers. Sometimes it went well. Sometimes it didn't go so well. Deebo Samuel is a guy who's known for his intensity as a blocker, helping out the run game. So you're getting all of those blocks checked. And then overall picture, you're getting a number 2 receiver, right? We spent all last season looking at the Washington Commanders roster saying, is it Noah Brown? Is it going to be Olamide Zaccheaus? Is it going to be De'Ami Brown? Is it going to be Jamison Crowder? Who is going to be that number 2 receiver? And basically the answer, depending on the week, depending on the game, especially after Noah Brown went down, was just yes. They're all going to be the number 2 receiver. It just depends on who's going to be the number 2 receiver this weekend or this drive or this play, right? There was never an established number 2, like I said, especially when Noah Brown went out with his kidney injury. I feel like before the kidney injury, I think Noah Brown was definitely kind of becoming that number 2 option. But I think now you have a legitimate number 2 option in Deebo Samuel, who's not only going to impact Jayden Daniels as a quarterback, but he's also going to impact Terry McLaurin as a wide receiver, which all kind of goes hand in hand, right? Because you look at defenses like, say, the Philadelphia Eagles, who did a really good job in their first matchup against the Washington Commanders, just taking Terry McLaurin away. And it wasn't the only game that we saw Terry McLaurin taken away. And I mean, first game of the season, Tampa Bay Buccaneers basically took away Terry McLaurin. So multiple defenses were able to come out here and say, you know what, we're going to game plan for Terry. We know what he does really well. We know what the Commanders really like to do with him because it just makes sense from a scouting perspective. We're going to go ahead and we're going to put all of our efforts into taking him away and making them win with one of the other guys. Well, if you make the Washington Commanders go out there and try to win with Deebo Samuel, that's something that you can do. You can certainly do that, right? There's a stat from StatMuse that talks about how successful the 49ers were overall when Deebo Samuel was on the field. It's like a 30-win difference between wins and losses. And then they have a losing record when Deebo Samuel's not on the field. So don't get caught up in stat scouting. I know you're going to do your own homework. You're going to do your own reviews. You're probably looking up YouTube videos other than this episode for highlights and everything else of Deebo Samuel. Great. Do all that stuff. But understand this is a guy whose impact on the field expands beyond his own stat box. And that's where we get into the Jayden Daniels conversation. We talk about quarterback, the most important position on the field. How do you protect a quarterback? You protect a quarterback with great offensive line play. You protect the quarterback by emphasizing what the quarterback's talents are. But you also protect the quarterback by giving him the weapons he needs to make the decision he needs to make. If I'm Jayden Daniels and I receive a snap and I've got a blitz coming and I need the ball out lickety split and I've got nobody that I know can get open super fast, that's a problem. That's a problem. When we talk about trading for Cooper Kupp from the Los Angeles Rams, that was one of the reasons why here, at least on Locked On Commanders, we were like, don't know if we're really down for that. Why? Cooper Kupp's ability to get open and separate quickly, just not there the way that it used to be. Deebo Samuel, when he's healthy, when he's on the field, availability being the most important ability in the National Football League, still one of the quickest guys, if not the quickest guy on the football field. He's going to be a guy that's going to be available for Jayden Daniels in those situations, because even your best offensive line in the National Football League can't prevent your quarterback from ever getting immediate pressure. It's going to happen. Eventually, it's going to happen at some point. And if you've got a quarterback like Jayden Daniels that doesn't flinch in the face of pressure, a guy like Deebo Samuel is going to help him do those things. But also, it's going to free up space for guys like Terry McLaurin. It's going to free up space for pass catching backs like Austin Eckler. It's going to free up space for tight ends like Zach Ertz. Hopefully he comes back. If not Zach Ertz, Ben Sinnott, right? It's going to do all those things. So that trickle down effect that a guy like Deebo Samuel has on the team. I went on 106.7 The Fan with Adam Epstein on Saturday afternoon. We talked about the potential for Deebo Samuel. I know he was having this conversation with a lot of Commanders fans about, are we on board with Deebo Samuel coming in, or are we not on board with it? And I was 100% on board with it. And I'll tell you right now, ever since this became a real possibility that Deebo Samuel would come to the Washington Commanders, I've had this one play just kind of sticking in my mind. And the play is, you've got 5 offensive linemen. You got an inline tight end, hopefully Zach Ertz, lined up on the line of scrimmage on the right side. Jayden Daniels in the shotgun. Austin Eckler, Brian Robinson, don't really care who, lined up immediately to his left. On the left side of the formation, you got wide receiver Terry McLaurin split out wide, because we know Terry McLaurin is going to be split out wide left most of the time. Deebo Samuel in the slot. Don't really care who's on the right side right now. Right now it would be Luke McCaffrey. Maybe it'll be Noah Brown. Maybe it'll be a rookie to be named later. Who knows? Either way, that's your formation. At the snap, Deebo Samuel is coming into motion. At snap motion, Deebo Samuel is crossing Jayden Daniels' face at the snap. The defense now, you got to defend 2 things right off the bat. You got to defend Deebo Samuel getting the handoff and running to the right side of the offensive formation, or Jayden Daniels keeping the ball and going either left or dropping straight back. Read option, right? Run pass option. You got Brian Robinson Jr. or Austin Eckler moving to the left side. If Jayden's running with them, you got a classic option play, which, look, we hear Cliff Kingsbury's offense criticized as a college option or a college offense. Well, let's bring back the option play. Or you've got him out there as a flare route, wheel route, wide receiver, whatever it is. Underneath on the left side, you got Terry McLaurin, who's now alone on the split wide left, running a quick slant inside. So if you crash down on that keeper or that option to the running back, you got Terry McLaurin running in there. Behind them, you got Zach Ertz running a post down the middle of the field. So you got Deebo Samuel running to the right. You got Zach Ertz running a post up the middle of the field. You got Terry McLaurin running a quick slant from the left side. You got a running back running a flare or a wheel route. And you got one of the most athletic quarterbacks in the National Football League who may or may not still have the ball, run the ball, or pass the ball. And oh, by the way, you still got a whole other receiver over here that you got to account for. If you're a defensive coordinator, that is your worst nightmare. That is absolutely your worst nightmare in the National Football League. And you've got a quarterback in Jayden Daniels who knows how to orchestrate all that stuff at one time, read what you're doing defensively, make the right decision consistently. That is the kind of thing that a guy like Deebo Samuel brings to the Washington Commanders offense, to quarterback Jayden Daniels, and that's just scratching the surface. But there are some concerns. We're going to continue to fill out this team's roster because obviously Deebo can't do it by himself. Neither can Jayden, neither can Terry McLaurin. And we're going to keep continuing to fill out that roster on Mock Draft Monday on our next episode. However, before we get out of this one, let's address some of the concerns that Commanders have about new wide receiver pending a physical, Deebo Samuel. We'll do that next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Commanders, reacting to the news that the Washington Commanders are trading for San Francisco 49ers wide receiver Deebo Samuel. We've talked about what it means for the team, what it hopefully means for you as a fan base. Again, even if you don't love Deebo, the idea of it right away, just love the fact that your team is that destination, man. Like, that is your team. Talked about the impact that he can make on the field from a bird's eye view and on guys like Terry McLaurin, guys like Jayden Daniels. Now let's talk about some of the concerns. Number one concern I hear from a lot of my insiders actually has to do with his personality. Is Deebo Samuel too much of a personality? Is he too much of a diva? Is he not a team player? Is he selfish? And look, like I told you, the next time I meet Deebo Samuel will be the first time I meet him in the National Football League. The first time I met him was the NFL Scouting Combine. This is a guy who's a second-round draft pick, was not considered one of the blue chip players, went to a team, the San Francisco 49ers, that runs the ultimate team offense. Like, they don't, like, the 49ers are one of the nightmare fantasy teams to have a player on the roster, your roster from, because they're one of those teams where the guy that you have, and I'm a guy who's had George Kittle on several fantasy rosters over the years, this dude could blow up, this dude could do nothing. And Kyle Shanahan, and he teaches his quarterbacks to not care who is absolutely getting the ball. Yet Deebo Samuel is able to not only play in that system, succeed in that system, thrive at times in that system, but also be a very big reason why that system was able to get to or threaten to get to several Super Bowls. So I would say Deebo Samuel, certainly, I mean, every NFL player wants to make plays. Every NFL player wants to contribute. And look, when you're losing, right, San Francisco 49ers won 6 games this year. So when you're losing football games, you're going to have some frustration. And again, you talk about a guy like Deebo Samuel who is passionate, who has that competitive spirit. Yeah, he's going to show some frustration, guys. It's part of the game. Doesn't mean that he's a selfish diva type of guy. And I would just lean on this. All right. And I've been saying this throughout this whole course of the conversation of it even possibly happening. You know who knows Deebo Samuel better than I do? Better than you do? You don't know Deebo Samuel as well as Adam Peters knows Deebo Samuel. So if Deebo Samuel is coming to this team, it's because Adam Peters, who helped usher in, and then I would even say was the catalyst to unlocking the door to this new culture that the Washington Commanders have embraced. If Adam Peters is saying this is a dude who fits what we're trying to do, I'm going to believe him until I have a reason not to. And the reason I would have to not believe him would be something that I would see or experience with my own 2 eyes, with my own 2 ears, with Deebo wearing burgundy and gold. Nothing he did while he's wearing red and gold. I don't know what color red the 49ers wear, red and gold. Whatever he did, yes, including trying to choke out kicker Jake Moody. Because I'll tell you right now, Deebo Samuel, not the only NFL player in the history of the league to want to choke out their kicker, not going to be the last one, not even the first one to try to do it. All right. But the thing about the San Francisco 49ers, the thing that made that situation with Deebo Samuel so electric is he's a marquee name. This is a marquee franchise and a team that coming into the 2024 season, guys, was expected to compete with the likes of the Detroit Lions, the Philadelphia Eagles, to be the NFC's best team. That was the expectation. So that's why it's such a big deal, right? And that's why it was made such a big deal. But again, I'm going to lead on Adam Peters, man. If Adam Peters says this dude is a commander, remember what he said just here this last week in Indianapolis at the Scouting Combine. We're not going out here just to make moves for the sake of making moves. We are going out looking for commanders. Dan Quinn said the same thing. We're going out looking for commanders. Lance Newmark, assistant GM, said the same thing. We're going out looking for commanders. So these people who established this culture believe Deebo Samuel is a commander. So until I have evidence otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and lean into Deebo Samuel is a competitor. That's the best thing, or a commander. And that's the best thing I can tell you as far as the concerns are. Now, on the field, there are some concerns about his health. How much does Deebo Samuel actually play in the National Football League? Well, I'll tell you this. Since his Super Bowl, or since his Pro Bowl season, 2021, he made the Pro Bowl. Ever since then, there is this perception that he has not maybe been as productive as his reputation would say, especially from an availability standpoint. Well, since 2021, so 2022, 23, 24 seasons combined, Deebo Samuel played 15 games in each of the last 2 years, played 13 games in 2022. So the last 2 years played 15 games. And look, let's be honest. Again, we're talking about the Washington Commanders trying to open up their Super Bowl window here and keep that thing open. If you're doing that, hopefully, you're going to be a Washington Commanders team that only wants to play your starters for about 15 games anyway, right? Like, let's be honest here. That's the goal. You want to be able to rest your guys for a week or two. Not that Dan Quinn would necessarily go the rest your guys route anyway. We want to at least have the option, right? But games played can be deceptive. So let's look at snaps in total. Today's NFL, offensive players are basically three wide receivers you're starting offensive players, right? So if you count that, that's 90 plus wide receivers that you would consider starting role possibility. Of those 90, Deebo Samuel ranks 35th in the National Football League in snaps over the last 3 seasons. Then that includes a season of 2022 where he only played 13 games. All right, he's 35th in National Football League. That's barely outside the wide receiver one realm, right? The top 32 receivers would be the top 32 receivers who played snaps for their NFL teams. Deebo, despite the quote-unquote questions about his availability, right outside that window of having the top 32 in snaps over the last 3 seasons. Production-wise, right, now you can look at his receiving yards, and you're looking at not 1,000-yard receiver. You got 632 yards in 22, 670 yards this last season, which again, a very down season for all 49ers, 892 yards the season before that. But if you look at his total offensive production, Deebo Samuel in the last 3 seasons is 20th among all NFL receivers in total offensive production. You're getting a top 20 offensive weapon as a wide receiver. And you want to talk about points scored, he is 13th in the NFL, again, in the last 3 seasons when it comes to points scored by wide receivers in the NFL. And again, that's counting a 2022 season where he played just 12 games. In the last 2 years, Deebo Samuel 11th, 96 points scored by Deebo Samuel. That's just behind a guy like Devontae Adams, ahead of DJ Moore, Nico Collins, Devontae Smith of the Philadelphia Eagles. So you talk about having Deebo coming in as a number 2. And again, we don't even know what the Washington Commanders are done doing here with this roster. So you can talk about the creation of a very, very potent offensive stable of weapons for one Jayden Daniels. So again, as far as concerns go, I wouldn't be too concerned about a lot of those things. Injuries can happen at any time to any player. So certainly could be something that creeps up. But again, you look at the numbers, you look at the production, you look at the attitude, you look at the man, you look at what this team is looking for, and you're doing it for a 5th round pick, reportedly, not confirmed. I mean, guys, that's a good move. That's a good move by Adam Peters. And you're not going to get that for a 5th round pick anywhere I come from, even if you are taking on all of his remaining money, which is the report, again, unconfirmed as of right now. So that is our first episode on Deebo. Look, we got a whole lot more to unpack about this thing, including how this now impacts our future outlook for the Washington Commanders. Deebo Samuel mock draft Monday coming up on our next episode of Locked On Commanders. In the meantime, if you've got further questions or comments, insiders, I know I haven't texted a lot of you back right now because I want to get right into the studio and get this thing knocked out for you. So I'm going to do that. But if you want to get in on those conversations, go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders and you can text with me today. Thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Draft podcast with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. Now that the season is over, get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every single day. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you are listening to this podcast. Speaking of this podcast, thank you so much for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every day. Every dayers, as always, thank you for coming through every single day. Until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind, and I will see you right back here next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.